We'd like to now return to our top story about accused homegrown terrorist Christopher Cornell. His father said he had no idea about his son's alleged plot. Arise News correspondent Colin Campbell has more on this developing story. Colin?
Hi, Debbie. What's puzzling some is that Cornell's parents say that he was a mama's boy, essentially, and that his best friend was the family cat. But U.S. authorities are painting a different picture of a man they say was intent on committing mass murder. The FBI says that 20-year-old Cincinnati man, Christopher Lee Cornell, hoped to set off a series of bombs aimed at lawmakers whom he allegedly considered enemies. U.S. court documents show that Cornell heavily researched how to construct and detonate pipe bombs and had planned to travel to Washington and use them at the U.S. State Capitol building. Reports also indicated that he wanted to shoot at employees and officials as they fled the building to have as many casualties as possible. Cornell was captured on Wednesday just after he finalized a purchase for a cache of firearms, including 2 semi-automatic rifles and 600 rounds of ammunition. According to charging documents, the FBI first noticed Cornell several months ago after an informant notified the agency that Cornell was allegedly voicing support for violent jihad on Twitter accounts under the alias Rahil Maras Ubaida. Since then, Cornell had met with informants and showed details on the plan to use bombs and firearms that he was still devising. Meanwhile, Cornell's parents paint a different picture of their son, who they say was friends with the family cat and who loved his mom. Cornell's father says he believes his son was set up because of his beard and the way he dressed, and that the FBI should have arrested him a long time ago if he was suspected of illegal activity.
Colin Campbell, Arise News, Washington.
Claire Lopez is Senior Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy. She's also a former CIA operations officer, and she joins us from Washington, D.C. Claire, welcome to Arise America. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, this has been a conversation for quite some time, and I just want to ask you, and that is about how does law enforcement, counterintelligence agencies keep track of the lone wolf? By definition, they're very difficult to track. So how does the government keep up with these groups or individuals?
Well, the first thing they have to do is gain a better understanding of what the threat is. The threat is not a lone wolf. The threat is Islamic Jihad. And these people, like Christopher Lee Collins, are what should be called individual jihadis. And whether or not they have actually been over to a battlefield in Syria or Iraq, joined up with ISIS on the battlefield or gained training, they are Muslims. In Cornell's case, he is a convert to Islam. Who heard the call to jihad and answered that call here, right here in the United States in Cincinnati, Ohio. So the first thing that law enforcement has to do is to train on what is this ideology, the ideology of Islamic Jihad that drives these people. And I think the other thing that connects here is that in every case like this, with an individual like Cornell, who converted to Islam, he was not raised a Muslim. He converted to Islam. There was a mosque involved. In his case, it's called the Abu Bakr Siddiqui Mosque in Cincinnati, Ohio. It will be important for law enforcement with a proper understanding to be observant of what goes on at that mosque, to understand who it was at the mosque that lured him in, oversaw his training and conversion, and inspired him to begin with to go on the pathway to jihad.
Of course, the point has to be made, although it's a very obvious point, that everyone that attends that mosque is not a radical, nor will they necessarily be radicalized. It's been quite controversial here in New York City in terms of mosque being under surveillance and the New York City Police Department being accused of religious profiling. So there seems to be a bit of a fine line, a tightrope to walk here.
Well, what we do understand is that in all of these cases, whether it's a person who was born and raised a Muslim or like Christopher Lee Collins, someone who converted to Islam, there will be a mosque involved. In every case, there will be a mosque involved. Understand, a mosque is not the exact Islamic equivalent of a church or a synagogue or a temple. It is rather a command and control center for jihad. And it is also a place of worship and prayer and devotion for many Muslims. But for people like Christopher Lee Collins and whoever it is that recruited him and oversaw his conversion to Islam, it was a different kind of a place. It was a place of indoctrination, of conversion.
So, Claire, how
and
important
recruitment.
then is an undercover agent in keeping track of these, as you call them, individual jihadists? Or in this case, it was an FBI informant, to use the common word, a snitch. What part does that play?
Well, in this case, too, like many others, we see that this young individual, Christopher Lee Collins, was involved on the internet. And that, too, is a place where a lot of indoctrination and training and recruitment takes place. It seems from the comments reported in the media that he made to undercover FBI informants that he was looking on the internet at perhaps videos, or perhaps he was on websites that were dedicated to Anwar al-Awlaki, the Islamic jihadist leader from Yemen, American citizen, killed in 2011 over there, who's got a lot of DVDs online with his sermons and so forth. Also, perhaps he might have been looking at the online magazines. Al-Qaeda puts one out, full color, slick English language, called Inspire, and the Islamic State puts one out called Dabiq. He very likely was looking at those because he cited to the informant, Collins cited to the informant, that he thought he had the go-ahead to commit an act of individual jihad. And that's exactly what those magazines are urging for Muslims in the West, especially, who do not make the trip over to battlefields in Syria.
Well, we can all be very thankful that this counter-terrorist effort did indeed work. Claire Lopez, we'll leave it right there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.